The cultural rebirth that occurred in Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries was known as the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a movement based on the rediscovery of the literature and art of ancient Greece and Rome. Galileo, Shakespeare, and Michelangelo were all major figures of the Renaissance movement, but it was Leonardo da Vinci, above all others, who was considered the ideal Renaissance man. This self-portrait in red chalk was sketched by da Vinci in 1512 at the age of 60. It's said to be the only one in existence. Leonardo was a master in the art of painting, sculpture, and architecture. He was also an accomplished engineer, map maker, and a pioneer in the study of the natural sciences. His scientific research and observations were far in advance of the times. In his numerous sketches can be seen examples of flying machines and tanks. Many of these inventions went undiscovered for hundreds of years and were never fully understood until the 20th century. We now present the life and works of Leonardo da Vinci, Renaissance man. Leonardo was born in the small Italian town of Vinci, near Florence, on April 15, 1452. He was the illegitimate son of Ser Piero da Vinci, a prominent Florentine notary, who took the name of the town he lived in as his own name. His mother was a peasant woman known as Caterina. He was raised in his father's house, where he demonstrated his artistic talents at an early age. In 1469, his family settled in Florence, the intellectual and artistic center of Italy. Leonardo was given the best education that the city could offer. It was around this time that Leonardo became the pupil of Florentine painter and sculptor Andrea del Verrocchio. Some of Leonardo's early work as a painter can be seen in Verrocchio's painting of the Baptism of Christ. He was allowed to paint parts of the background landscape as well as one of the attending angels. His fine eye for detail and realism can be seen here and in his future work. By 1478, Leonardo had established his own studio in Florence and was becoming well known for such works as his painting of Jesus and Mary in Benoit Madonna, the Annunciation, the portrait of Ginevra da Benci, and the unfinished painting of Saint Jerome. In his paintings, he had used what he had learned about nature and science to make the backgrounds as realistic as his subjects. In 1481, the monks of San Donato a Scopeto in Florence commissioned Leonardo to do an altarpiece entitled The Adoration of the Magi. But Leonardo was not happy in Florence and began his search elsewhere for work. He wrote a letter to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, and offered him his services. The Duke accepted his offer, and by 1482, Leonardo was in Milan, leaving The Adoration of the Magi forever unfinished. Between 1482 and 1499, he served the Duke of Milan in a variety of capacities. Leonardo served as principal engineer in numerous military enterprises. As an architect, he entered the competition to design the Dome of Milan Cathedral, although the project was never constructed. As director of court pageants, he designed the settings and costumes as well as the stage machinery. Evidence indicates that Leonardo had apprentices and pupils in Milan, and it was for them that he probably wrote his now famous treatise on painting and drew all the sketches for what they executed. Of Leonardo's own paintings during his early Milan period, the most important one is Virgin on the Rocks. Before it was painted, most artists would outline their subjects and use very flat backgrounds. Leonardo painted his people without outlining them. He made the shadows of his people almost blend into the background, making the lighted parts seem to come forward, giving the painting an almost three-dimensional appearance. 18 years later, Leonardo would paint the Virgin of the Rocks again. The two paintings look almost exactly the same. It was also during this period that Leonardo painted Portrait of a Young Woman and The Lady with the Ermine, the latter being a portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, the Duke of Milan's mistress. Between 1495 and 1497, Leonardo da Vinci labored on his masterpiece, The Last Supper. This great mural was done for the wall of a dining room at the Church of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan. The Last Supper shows Jesus with his 12 apostles. The apostles are reacting to Jesus' announcement that one of them will betray him. The special way Leonardo placed the men around the table gives them a feeling of movement that had never been seen before. Unfortunately, Leonardo's experimental use of oil on dry plaster was unsound, and soon the work began to deteriorate. Although much of the original surface is gone, the greatness of the composition still exists. In 1499, the French invaded Milan and Leonardo was forced to leave. After a brief period abroad, he returned to Florence in 1500. It was here that Leonardo began work on the painting St. Anne with Virgin and Child. It would go unfinished for 10 years. 2 years after returning to Florence, he entered the service of Caesar Borgia, a cardinal and Duke of Romana. He served as Borgia's military engineer. During his 10 months with Borgia, he traveled through much of central Italy and produced a large number of maps. Today, these maps are important monuments in the history of cartography, the art of map-making. Upon returning to Florence again in 1503, Leonardo was engaged to design one of the large murals in the great council hall of the Palazzo Vecchio. The subject was the Battle of Anghiari, an episode in the war between Florence and Pisa. He made many drawings for it and completed a full-size sketch in 1505, but he never did finish the wall painting. The sketch itself was destroyed in the 17th century, and the composition only survives in copies, the most famous of which is by the Flemish painter Peter Paul Rubens. During this time in Florence, Leonardo painted many portraits, but only one of them survives today, the Mona Lisa. It's one of the most celebrated portraits in the world. Everyone who has looked upon her face wonders about the mysterious look the lady has, especially her soft smile. Leonardo worked on the Mona Lisa for 4 years, and although it might not look like it, it was never fully finished. By 1506, Leonardo was back in Milan and working as artistic advisor to French Governor Charles d'Amboise. The following year, he was named court painter to Louis XII, King of France, who was then in Milan. For the next 6 years, he divided his time between Milan and Florence. In Milan, he continued his many engineering projects and worked on an equestrian figure for a monument to Gian Giacomo Trivulzio, commander of the French forces in the city. This project, along with many others, was never completed. By the end of 1513, Leonardo was in Rome and in the court of the new Pope, Leo X. During the next 2 years, the aged artist worked on no major commissions, but wrote continuously in his notebooks on a variety of different subjects, such as anatomy, mathematics, and mechanical studies. In 1517, Leonardo moved to France at the invitation of King Francis I. He was proclaimed royal painter, architect, and engineer, although he was no longer active in those roles. It was at his residence near the city of Amboise, France, that Leonardo da Vinci died on May 2, 1519, at the age of 67. He was buried here at the Church of St. Florentin in Amboise. Leonardo's notebooks were bequeathed to his disciple Francesco Melzi and remained together through the 16th century. By the 1600s, however, they were dispersed and are now preserved in various libraries in Milan, Turin, Paris, London, Windsor, and Madrid. Encyclopedic in scope of subject matter, the notebook's text was written in reverse, that is, read from right to left. Leonardo was left-handed, and so mirror writing, as it was called, was more comfortable and natural for him. It was these notebooks that occupied most of his time and accounts for many of his unfinished projects. We now present a few of Leonardo's many achievements that are found in his infamous notebooks. The first subject is physics. This drawing by Leonardo is for a device for calculating the balance of objects. This one is for testing the qualities and density of the air and to determine when it's going to rain, the precursor of the barometer. This design is for an apparatus for testing the expansion of steam. This concept would be used hundreds of years later with the invention of the steam engine. And these 3 designs were to demonstrate the impossibility of perpetual motion. The next subject is the music of Leonardo da Vinci. Although we have no compositions from the hand of Leonardo, there's no doubt that he could write music, as in this example. Leonardo was also a great inventor of musical instruments, although the inventions only exist on paper. These drawings show us his invention for a mechanical violin. This one demonstrates a mechanical drum. And this drawing demonstrates a mechanical hammer for ringing bells. Astronomy was another subject that fascinated Leonardo. Here we see his study for measuring the Earth from its surface to its center, while this drawing shows the eclipses of the moon. This one details how the moon reflects the light from the sun. Leonardo even tried to calculate the distance of the sun from the Earth, as well as determining the size of the moon. In his study of optics, Leonardo was able to draw this schematic of the human eye, and developed experiments for studying laws of refraction. As well as studying the human eye, Leonardo was a great student of human anatomy. Here are some of his drawings of the human form, beginning with this skeleton of the trunk and limbs. In this study, we see the muscles of the back and upper limb. In this impressive drawing, we see the transparent trunk of a female human body with the internal organs visible. This drawing shows the human embryo correctly curled up, but inside the uterus of a cow. Leonardo was the first person to depict accurately the compact position of the human embryo. But perhaps Leonardo's most famous drawing of the human form is his Canon of Proportions, which depicts man in relation to the circle and square, illustrating the proportional canon set forth by the Roman architect Vitruvius. In the study of hydraulics, Leonardo was advanced well beyond his years. Here he demonstrates his apparatus for breathing underwater, as well as a diving suit with a well and reservoir pumps operated by water wheels. He even devised a method for walking on water. Although none of his designs were ever constructed, Leonardo's notebooks are filled with his numerous examples of fine architecture. From these simple designs of double and quadruple staircases to these examples of buildings in a city with raised streets, as well as a self-contained water system. Leonardo also did numerous studies and experiments on the strength of beams and columns, and was also fascinated with designing domed churches. Another fascination of Leonardo's was the study of the flight of birds. From these studies come some wondrous inventions, hundreds of years before their time. This diagram is of a ribbed wing, partly covered by silk, and is equipped with a crank device for manipulating the wings in flight. This design, which Leonardo called an aerial screw, is a predecessor to the modern helicopter, and these designs were the predecessors to the airplane, including this model of a four-winged flying machine with an operator in the lower section. Some of Leonardo's other great machines include this perspective and plan drawings of an automotive wagon, which is moved by a system of springs and is equipped with a differential transmission. Here we see a thread-cutting machine, a machine for drilling wells, and even a machine for file making, which reflects the modern concept of automation. Believe it or not, Leonardo even invented the bicycle, on paper anyway. This crude drawing was made roughly 325 years before the modern bicycle was first produced. At first, Leonardo designed square teeth for the chain of the bike, but soon found this quite impractical and arrived at a truly modern design for a chain link with rounded teeth. Leonardo was also involved in the study of botany. In his notebooks, we see an endless variety of plants and flowers that he cataloged in his botanical studies. Not only does Leonardo study the structure and development of plants, but also the influence of external agents, such as the effect of poisons on them. Finally, we look at Leonardo's military engineering and arms designs. These were probably made while in the services of the Duke of Milan and Caesar Borgia, and are truly inspiring in their originality. This design is of a machine for making musket balls. For cannons, he designed this device for moving them on inclined wheels, as well as an automatic device for elevating them. Leonardo even devised a multiple-barreled machine gun. This sketch of a bombard with explosive projectiles strikes an uncanny resemblance to the cannons that were used in the American Civil War over 400 years later. Leonardo drew many designs for defending fortresses. In this impressive drawing, we see the defense of a bastion by means of bombard fire. This is a device for knocking over assault ladders, while this is a study of a missile-throwing machine for defending a wall of a fortress. Here we see a war machine with multiple rotating blades, as well as a covered armored car, which is a predecessor to the modern tank. This sketch shows Leonardo's design for a giant crossbow on a carriage with inclined wheels. Leonardo also invented this apparatus for loading crossbows and even devised this contraption, a machine gun type crossbow that enables the archer suspended inside the big treadwheel to keep the arrows flying at a rapid pace. The archer's assistants furnish the foot power to turn the wheel under the protection of a planked shield that Leonardo has provided for them. All of these inventions, including this one for catapults, enabled Leonardo to advance the art of warfare to a higher level. By the time Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks were published, the ideas behind his inventions had already been discovered by others. This does not make his discoveries any less important. If they were released during his lifetime, his notebooks would have had a profound effect on the world. Leonardo also had a regrettable habit of starting ambitious projects but never finishing them. This, however, does not take away from the eternal beauty of the Adoration of the Magi or the Mona Lisa. It's difficult to imagine that just one man possessed all of these great gifts, but Leonardo da Vinci did. He was an accomplished painter, scientist, architect, botanist, mathematician, military engineer, astronomer, and mapmaker, just to name a few. His contributions to the Renaissance has had a lasting impression on the world and makes Leonardo da Vinci the epitome of a true Renaissance man.